Good evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. Tonight, a one-hour episode. First up, leading doctors react to the government's top epidemiologist, Dr. Jaiprakash Mulliyal, who told us yesterday on this program that we'll all get Omicron, the boosters won't work, and that Omicron is basically a cold. In fact, the head of the government's COVID-19 task force, Dr. V.K. Paul, today in a press conference stated that Omicron is far from being a cold. So a rather public contradiction to what was stated yesterday. What's more, the government has made an important amendment in its testing protocol after having controversially stated that healthy contacts of COVID patients did not need to test themselves. Now the government says all contacts of COVID patients must quarantine for 7 days. That makes a lot of sense given the transmissibility of Omicron. Later on the program, no chief ministerial candidate yet for Congress, no chief ministerial candidate, no chief ministerial face ahead of the Punjab elections, and it already appears to be Channi versus Sidhu, with each leader making noises on the need for a face to be announced. But who's going to actually name that person the centre, or is it going to be decided at the level of the state? But Channi's take and Sidhu's take on how this process needs to happen is diametrically different. Is this going to emerge as another problem for the Congress, which had faced one crisis after another in Punjab? But first, let's start with what Dr. Mulliyal, the country's top government epidemiologist, told us yesterday as far as Omicron was concerned, where he said it was a cold, and what the head of the COVID-19 task force had to say today.
The issue is that the consequence of a viral infection is just like that of a cold.
Dr. Mulliyal, did you just say that this is a disease which, Omicron, which presents itself just like the cold?
Absolutely.
Omicron is not common cold. इसी ओमिक्रॉन की वजह से कई देशों के हेल्थ सिस्टम कोलैप्स हो गए.
All right, well, that was just one point. What we're going to be doing on this program, and we've got two wonderful guests, Dr. Rajesh Parekh, Director of Medical Research at Jaslok Hospital. We're also joined by Dr. Amrish Mithal, Chairman of Endocrinology and Diabetes at Max Healthcare. I'd like to thank you both very much for being with us. We're going to play out quote by quote, right, what was said yesterday by Dr. Jaiprakash Mulliyal and get you both to react. But first, let me go across to Dr. Parekh. Did you see the entire interview last night, sir? Because there were lots of points which were fairly controversial.
I did, Vishnu, and it was a struggle to sit through the entire interview. I was cringing at certain points, but I wanted to also hear what the policy decisions might be. So I did sit through it, and I must confess that I experienced a range of emotions, starting with amusement to begin with, but that soon turned into being puzzled, to astonishment, and then even being appalled. I mean, I saw a lot of what was being said at the intersection between nihilism and callousness. You know, there were two Venn diagrams. Most of the interview just fell in that. Of course, I did see you making a valiant yet polite effort to be rational, but there seemed to be a certain quality of tone deafness to the responses that were being put out to your questions.
So let's go point by point, and I'll get both your views on this, both the doctors on this program. Firstly, does Omicron present itself just like the cold? He told me yesterday, absolutely. Dr. Mithal, your response to that, is this a common cold?
So Omicron can present like a common cold. Yes, it can start like that, and some patients may just have a common cold-like experience. But we are not seeing that in many patients. Patients get fever, they get severe headache, body ache. Some of them get severe throat pain, intractable throat pain. And many of them actually, whatever experience we have over the last couple of weeks, many of them are not okay in 2 days or 3 days. They take good 5 to 7 days to recover. So in terms of pure symptomatology, it at times can be like common cold, but I don't think it will be very smart to think of it as a common cold at all.
Dr. Parekh, should we think of this as a common cold?
Not in the least. I think it's a travesty and a trivialization of Omicron to compare it to the common cold. I'm glad Dr. Paul made that correction today. But exactly a week ago, on the 5th of January, the WHO warned that it should not be treated as a common cold. And if you look at the evidence, if you look at the genetic structure of the two viruses, the one that causes the common cold and the one that causes Omicron, there's only one point of insertion at 9 nucleotide level where there is something in common. The rest of it is different. Vishnu, 95% of our genome is common to that of the chimpanzee. The 5% does make a difference, I believe.
Next point that he mentioned when I asked him, is Omicron unstoppable? He said, and I quote, "It's almost unstoppable because it is highly infectious. Most of us will not know we've been infected. Probably more than 80% will not even know." Dr. Rajesh Parekh, is this unstoppable?
Well, not exactly. I do concede that there may be a grain of truth in what he's saying. But, what is appalling is therefore the conclusion that one derives from it. I mean, take, for instance, in October, November of 1962, the Chinese army seemed unstoppable as it came over the border across to us. But valiant soldiers fought, died for our freedom. We didn't put our hands up and say that this is unstoppable. At this point, Vishnu, this particularly affects me because more than 500,000 frontline workers have been infected. Several thousand have died. People from your own profession have been infected and have died.
Yes.
So to say that it is unstoppable, you may have a grain of truth in it. But I think what you derive from that therefore you don't need vaccines, boosters, which perhaps you'll come to later, didn't make any sense to me at all.
The other, the second part of this, which Dr. Mittal, I'd like you to take on, is he says that probably more than 80% will not even know. Now, I've always been a little confused about asymptomatic cases because, again, on the basis of covering this now for 2 odd years, there are very few people who are 100% asymptomatic. There is always a small manifestation of a symptom. You could have the sniffles, you can ignore it, but that is still a symptom. Therefore, if there is a perspective from the government, right, because he represents the government, that more than 80% will not even know, isn't that number catastrophically high?
I think the 80% figure is fairly arbitrary. Although, Vishnu, it is true that people who have viral fevers, viral infections like SARS-CoV-2, like the Delta variant also, many of them were picked up only later on seropositivity studies as evidence that they had the infection. And they didn't really get any significant symptoms. So it is possible that a significant proportion of people will not know they've been infected, especially the younger, healthier people who may have absolutely no or trivial symptoms, as you say. But it is possible in science to have large chunk of people, but 80%, I don't know where the figure came from. I think that's just a way of expressing that a majority may not know that they have been infected. See, the important point here, and I'll quickly make a point, is that you were talking of common cold and you were talking of not knowing, and maybe you'll come to this later. The gravity of the disease of Omicron can be seen by today's Delhi statistics. And if you want, we can discuss that now.
No, we've got the numbers. Hang on a second, doctor. I'm pulling up the numbers. Let's talk about them. Let's pull up those Delhi numbers today, because if you've got 40 deaths, which have been reported.
40 deaths.
Yes, that's right. We'll pull that number up because I have a date of when it's the highest number since.
Yes.
We cannot be trivializing this, right?
No.
No, not this. Let's pick up the data as far as Delhi deaths is concerned. We're just trying to get that. Delhi's third
600
wave. Number
people
is
in the ICU,
40
Vishnu,
people have died.
And 40 have died today.
Right. It's not trivial. It's not we'll get that graphic sooner than later. Dr. Mittal, go ahead with the point you're making.
So the point I'm making is that what the South African data showed is that Delta may be 4 to 5 times more infectious than, Omicron may be 4 to 5 times more infectious than Delta. And the disease may be less severe in Omicron. We all agree on that. There's no question. But the sheer numbers will fill up our ICUs and fill up our beds sooner rather than later. And one has to be prepared for that. So 618 people in the ICU in Delhi today, if I'm not wrong, and 40 deaths. So and look at the deaths for the whole month of December.
No, I'm
or
going to talk
November,
about
they were
these
not
numbers
40.
a little bit more because, you know, let's have that up full frame. Let's have this graphic up full frame.
Yes,
Delhi's
yes.
third wave cases are still rising. It's up to 40 deaths today. So that's not a small number. In fact, if you look at the last 2 weeks, this is something which is true in a lot of states. West Bengal deaths in the last 2 weeks of COVID have been 203, but in the 2 weeks prior to that have been 113, so that's been going up. Maharashtra has gone up as well. Tamil Nadu has gone up. Delhi has gone up. Delhi in the last 2 weeks, 93 deaths. In the previous 2 weeks, 7 deaths. Right? Chhattisgarh, deaths in the last
nothing,
2 weeks,
and
23.
no deaths.
In the previous 2 weeks, 6. So, sorry, we've got the numbers, you know, and you know, this is the number of cases, so that's a different number. But your point is very well taken, sir. It's not that people aren't dying, they are dying. The numbers might still be small, but there are sick people who are dying. Go ahead, Doctor, with your point before I go across to Dr. Parekh. Yes.
No, what I was trying to say is that the sheer numbers, the sheer infectivity of the virus is such that it's infecting a very large number of people. And even if a small proportion of them are requiring ICU care, oxygen care, and deaths are happening. And you can see that trajectory. Look at the data for December. I don't think we had most days we had 0 deaths.
Right.
Okay, so
Exactly.
so you suddenly have reached this stage.
Yeah.
So obviously something is happening. We can't be stupid and shut our eyes to this, you know. So quite clearly we need to do whatever we can to contain it. If we take the other extreme view that it doesn't matter, it's a common cold, everyone's going to get it. I mean, you might as well stop wearing masks. I mean, why observe any precautions anyway?
Exactly.
I mean, that's kind of an extreme view that I'll not subscribe to at all.
Dr. Parekh, the next point that he mentioned yesterday, I asked him in a rather exasperated manner because I didn't understand what he was saying. I said, will we all therefore get Omicron, doctor? Is that what you're trying to say? To which he said, that is correct. We'll all get Omicron. And let me say his exact words. That is correct. It's so infectious, much more infectious than Delta. That is, of course, correct. It is way more transmissible. But do you accept that we'll all get it, Dr. Parekh?
What do I say, Vishnu? It's such a rhetorical and obvious question. We're all going to die anyway. Does that mean that we lead a reckless life? And just a minor thing about this thing that it's possible. Well, in medicine, everything is possible. A malignant lung cancer, it's possible. It may present as a cough. But are we going to equate the two because there is some overlap in the symptomatology? So it's quite clear. And I could see that exasperation on your face yesterday as you kept trying to negotiate your way in a very polite and civil manner as a good host should.
Don't think any of us have any desire of getting Omicron, or those of us lucky enough not to have had COVID so far. We try and fight to ensure that we stay free. In fact, at this point, both doctors, let me tell you something. A lot of people wonder whether there's a double standard in a news anchor like me right now talking to you about COVID and not having a mask on. There is nobody within 35 feet of me in any direction right now, right? That's a basic precaution that we take to ensure that, and it's a huge sort of room that I'm in right now. It's massive. And we've done this for 2 years. Within 35 feet of me, at least, it could be 40 feet, there is not a single person. So we try and protect ourselves. So no double standards in this entire thing. But let me move on to my next question. Should we be changing our policy on testing is what I asked him yesterday. He said, we have learned to live with it. Even when Delta was around, we always multiply the number of cases picked up by about 30 to get to the real number. This particular one, we just increased 30 to probably 60. So, Dr. Mithal, would you like to take this on? We've changed our policy of testing. And is it enough to say that, it's okay if we have, because we'll never get the real number. The real number is 60 times what is being reported now. But that may be true, by the way. That may be true. And I think it's important to stress that. But I'm just asking or wanting to know, does that mean we change testing? Because testing gives us numbers besides anything else.
So I think we need to understand where that 30 and 60 is coming from, So why 60? I mean, why not 600?
He said 60 to 90 later on.
I know.
Yes.
So what I'm saying
Yes.
is that these are sort of relatively arbitrary statements to my mind. But what probably he wants to say is that, yeah, we will have more undetected cases in this because of the severity of symptoms being much less than Delta. Probably that's the one line that was tried to be communicated. The policy on testing is necessitated by probably the increasing demand and spread, and the fact that as the government promises that everyone who has been in contact with anyone who's positive should get a test, it probably increases the load on the system to a point where they see it cannot be managed. So
and there was an
therefore-
amendment today, which was so good.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm
Which is
just
a
coming to
great
that.
amendment. It makes so much sense. If you are a contact of somebody who's COVID positive, be in
Quarantine.
home quarantine for a week. It makes perfect sense.
Absolutely.
It also benefits a system where you say that, look, we can't just test immediately because we've limited infrastructure. All right. Quarantine yourself. If you fall sick, then test. So it works both ways. We should have had this a couple of days back. I think it makes so much
I
sense.
completely agree with the amendment, and I
Yeah.
think that's a
Yeah.
very important step taken.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you would just be let loose like that, which is what I was going to say. That in case you can't test, you can quarantine, and now it's come as a guideline. The other thing you can do is, if you don't want to strain the government system, the rapid antigen home testing has taken off in a big way. We are getting fairly good results. The specificity of the test, which means that the chances of being positive, if the test is positive, are close to 100%.
So that's
you will
great.
still miss
Yeah.
patients.
Which
You
is
will
a big
still miss
change from
patients.
what it was.
So
Yeah.
you can do it. Like if you feel that you've been exposed, it costs 200, 300 rupees. Go and get that test done. So at
Right.
least as an individual, you can be responsible and make sure that people around you are not affected.
Next question. Dr. Parekh, I asked Dr. Mulial yesterday, do boosters play a key role in fighting Omicron? He said, and I quote, a philosophy the world over that natural infection doesn't impart any lasting immunity. Now, that is a philosophy which I think is wrong. That was his answer.
Well,
Dr. Parekh.
yes, I'll come to that, Vishnu. But if I may, I'd just like to give a simple analogy which will clear up this whole issue of testing. I told you I went at a certain point from being astonished to being appalled, and that was the point of testing because, I think he went a step beyond. He says, we've learned from the first time around that testing really didn't make any difference to the spread of the pandemic. And that's what I believe I heard him say. And, we all know that what went wrong the first time, it was too little, too late in the testing. Now, the analogy that comes to my mind is if you're driving and you press on the pedal a bit too late and a bit too little, and you head into a crash which kills a lot of people, I think to draw the conclusion that brakes are not necessary because, they didn't work this time. There are several other conclusions you need to examine, including the fact whether it was too little, too late that led to the disaster, or whether it was just having brakes in the first place. So I think that should answer this issue of testing. About the booster dose, what can I say? I mean, you can put philosophy aside. We're all entitled, of course, to our personal philosophies, but the data is loud and clear. It's there across the world. And, I think it's beneath to even try to attempt to answer that question. We have to look at the data. Boosters work. And that's why boosters have been introduced in our country. So if they don't work, why did we introduce them in the first place?
Okay. Now, he also said, and I asked him this question, were most Indians infected before their first vaccine? I quizzed him on this because he'd said it. And he said, in fact, let me, because I need to be accurate about this, we spoke yesterday about Indians being infected earlier on. And his answer was, and I quote, in India, more than 85% got infected before the vaccine arrived. So the first dose of vaccine most people received, whether they knew they had an infection or not, was a booster dose. What I don't understand is this, Dr. Mittal. How did we know that 85% of Indians did actually get COVID prior to getting their first dose? Because the seropositivity studies happen afterwards.
Yeah, they certainly were not in the range of 85% at that point. And that answers the earlier question itself. If 85% were seropositive and they had the infection because of whatever, the first wave, during the first wave, then why was the Delta wave so devastating? If natural immunity was so good, plus you got one shot, You got a booster, according to some. So if you got a booster and you had natural immunity, 85% have infected, and yet you had that devastation of April and May. I mean, there's something wrong. No, both can't be right.
I actually think, and Dr. Parikh, I'll get your views on this, that statement that 85% of Indians had actually tested positive before the vaccines were rolled out is a glaring indictment of the rollout of vaccines the first time around. Because the fact is, we did not roll out vaccines for a large population of ours early enough. When we realized people were dying of Delta, we stopped exports, rolled them out into the country. But today you've actually got the government's top epidemiologist making this remark. It seems to suggest that what a lot of people have said earlier on as well, that we'd never rolled the vaccines out fast enough. How many people lost their lives because of that?
Vishnu, it's appalling from several points of view. You've given one kind of prismatic view of it. Let me give you another one. It's an absolute contradiction of ICMR's own data. ICMR's data, first of all, indicates that in the Sero survey, the immunity was not distributed evenly. They stated in so many words that it was not geographically even. It was higher in the cities, it was higher in some clusters. It was uneven geographically, but it was also uneven demographically. ICMR's own data shows that children had lower seropositivity than adults. Therefore, as a corollary to the argument, they do become indeed more vulnerable. That's another issue altogether. And if I remember right, the ICMR data at that point talked of 67%. But a very uneven distribution geographically and demographically. So where this magical number of 85 evenly across the country was conjured from is something that I find hard to understand.
All right. Well, I think...
Well, also, Vishnu, in that case, I mean, not only the Delta, why then we getting this Omicron surge? If 85% already had positivity and then we rolled out the vaccine, I mean, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up at all.
To be the devil's advocate, because it's a completely different beast, Dr. Mittal.
I hope that there's no pun intended in that, Vishnu.
Look, I'd like to thank you both very much for joining us. And I think we'll have you back again when we need to talk more seriously about boosters for a large number of people, whoever is eligible. World over, after 6 months of the second dose, you get a booster. We can debate which booster is best. And that's a really healthy, important, scientific debate to have. But to stretch it to 9 months, that too only for frontline workers, and those with comorbidities above the age of 60, a lot of people suggest is a big risk. In a country like ours, how do you know that people between 40 and 60 don't have comorbidities? I mean, both of you are doctors, you treat patients in this age group with comorbidities. It's a sad reality around the world, certainly in India. We'll talk about boosters later. I'm out of time. I've got a couple of views coming in.